story begins with Hiraku, a Riz god who awakens from a dream of his previous life, one filled with betrayal and a terminal illness, only to find himself in a strange new world. Greeting the morning with a sense of wonder, he reflects on how surreal it feels to live such a peaceful life after everything he endured. In the afterlife, Hiraku encountered a god who acknowledged the harshness of his past existence. The god, feeling responsible, offers Hiraku a second chance at life, this time free from illness. As an apology, the god also grants him a wish. After a moment of thought, Hiraku requests the opportunity to try his hand at farming, a peaceful pursuit he admired while bedridden. To fulfill this wish, the god bestows upon Hiraku a magical farming tool, setting the stage for his new beginning. Hiraku finds himself in a vast, untouched forest. Overjoyed by his newfound health, he decides to start his farming life there. He's intrigued by the magical tool in his hand, which transforms into any implement he needs. With ease, he begins cultivating the land, marveling at the rich soil. As he explores, Hiraku prioritizes finding food and water. He uses the tool to dig a well, successfully uncovering an underground water source. Setting up camp near a large tree, he contemplates his next steps in this unfamiliar world. Hiraku's new life is filled with simple yet fulfilling tasks. He fells trees to clear space for his farm, narrowly avoiding a mishap with a falling trunk. He then digs a makeshift shelter within the tree, crafting utensils to aid his survival. The sight of 2 moons confirms his suspicion. He is indeed in another world. Days pass as Hiraku continues to build his new life. He constructs a functional toilet and a secure shelter, slowly transforming the forest into a livable space. When a monstrous rabbit attacks, Hiraku deftly uses his tool to defend himself, turning the beast into his next meal. Soon, his farm begins to flourish, with plants sprouting faster than expected, likely due to the tool's magic. To protect his crops, Hiraku builds a fence and a ditch, all while fending off more creatures. One day, 2 stray dogs appear at his homestead. They are wary but not aggressive. After feeding them, Hiraku discovers one is pregnant. She gives birth overnight, and Hiraku provides a safe haven for the new family. Naming the dogs Kuro and Yuki, along with their pups, he feels a sense of companionship in their presence. With his farm now thriving, Hiraku looks forward to growing more crops, building a storehouse, and expanding his home. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a girl speaks of the dangerous forest of death, teeming with monsters, hinting at future adventures for Hiraku. Concerned about Hiraku's well-being, the god overseeing his second chance decides to check on him. To the god's dismay, he realizes he has placed Hiraku in the perilous forest of death, a place teeming with dangers. The god acknowledges another mistake, yet, surprisingly, Hiraku seems to be thriving. Hiraku, meanwhile, has discovered that the magical tool granted by the gods allows plants to sprout almost instantly wherever he prepares the soil. Grateful for this gift, Hiraku carves statues to honor the gods and continues expanding his farm. His growing affection for his canine companions, Kuro and Yuki, deepens as they help him navigate the vast forest. Their guidance leads him to a river, where Hiraku plans to dig a tunnel to bring water closer to his camp, though he starts with constructing a toilet near the water source. Ever resourceful, Hiraku experiments by transforming his tool into a wheelbarrow, finding it effortless to carry loads without tiring. His farm flourishes with an array of vegetables, including soybeans. However, lacking salt, Hiraku makes do with the bounty his land offers. As winter approaches, Hiraku prepares diligently, gathering food and wood. One day, a giant spider appears. Far from hostile, the spider gifts Hiraku a handkerchief and makes its home in the large tree nearby. In exchange for food, the spider, whom Hiraku names Zabuton, crafts clothes and other essentials from animal pelts, providing Hiraku with a newfound sense of civilization. Winter comes, and Zabuton retreats to hibernate, leaving Hiraku feeling a touch of loneliness. Yet spring brings renewal. Kuro and Yuki's pups grow up and return with their own partners. Zabuton also emerges with its offspring, adding to the lively community. One day, the dogs and spiders alert Hiraku to a strange presence, a young girl entangled in spiderwebs. She pleads for help, and as Hiraku approaches, she bites him, transforming into a young woman. The dogs attack, forcing her back into her child form. The girl, Rururushi, reveals she is a vampire fleeing from nobles who sought her research on medicinal plants. Hiraku, intrigued and empathetic, invites her to stay, despite her warnings about her pursuers and her nature as a vampire. Ru is amazed by Hiraku's thriving farm in such a dangerous place and the magical tool that aids his work. She eagerly tries his fresh produce, delighted by the variety and taste. Hiraku, valuing this rare companionship, persuades Ru to stay, and she agrees, finding no other place to go. Together, they continue expanding the farm, with Ru suggesting they grow medicinal herbs. The next morning, Ru adopts a younger appearance to maintain boundaries, and they continue their life in the forest. Hiraku, now calling her the first villager of his settlement, humorously corrects himself, acknowledging the many animals already residing there. Together, they plan to cultivate more crops and perhaps even more villagers in their growing haven. With a touch of magic, Ru brightens up the living space by installing lights in the toilet and other areas. Hiraku, having almost given up hope on finding salt, is surprised when Ru points out that one of the soil layers is rich in salt, and he wonders how he missed it despite all his digging efforts. Checking on his fruit garden, Hiraku realizes that fruit takes longer to mature compared to vegetables. Suddenly, Zabuton raises an alarm. Hiraku, alongside Ru, hurries to investigate and discovers a girl caught by the spiders and dogs. She apologizes for her attack and pleads for help. After Hiraku frees her, she uses magic to heal herself, then notices Ru, who had been hiding. The girl attempts to capture Ru but is quickly subdued by the dogs again. Hiraku brings the girl, Tia, back home. Ru explains that she, too, had been in a similar situation with the dogs, noting their immunity to magic and ability to evade spells. When Tia inquires about Hiraku, Ru, blushing, introduces him as her husband. Tia, an angel, surprises Hiraku, who assumed angels served a deity. Ru clarifies that angels are warrior-like beings, stronger than they are wise. Tia reveals that Ru has a bounty on her due to her destructive experiments in town. Ru admits she may have gone too far once, but insists it was a lesson for the demanding nobles. Tia, impressed by Ru's candidness, agrees to stay with them and joins Ru in showing the crops. They spend the day harvesting, and Tia enjoys the fresh produce. As days pass, Tia requests they grow more strawberries. Hiraku agrees but notes the challenge of harvesting and consuming all the crops. Noticing the growing dog family, Hiraku decides to build a larger shelter for them. Naming the new puppies proves difficult due to their sheer number. Tia eventually returns with a group of high elf girls, introducing them as Leah, Leaf, Leket, Lise, Lily, Lita, and Lise, all related. The elves, having lost their village to war, seek a new home. Ru suggests they stay, highlighting the elves' talents. Hiraku agrees, provided they get along with the other residents. The elves faint upon meeting Zabuton and the dogs. Hiraku, with the elves' help, constructs a large house for them, learning their advanced building techniques. The elves' home impresses Hiraku, inspiring thoughts of upgrading his own. The house features a communal living area and individual rooms upstairs. Surprised by the elves' use of meat and fire, Hiraku's misconceptions about their nature are corrected by Leah, who explains the practicalities of forest life. They plan to mine and forge, needing a furnace for iron. Hiraku, excited by the prospect of metal tools, sees their potential. The elves notice the wheat field, prompting a bread-making session with yeast they've brought. This sparks Hiraku's desire to expand the wheat field. However, he soon questions land ownership. Ru reassures him that the land, technically under the Demon Lord's domain, is effectively his due to his efforts. Tia, Ru, and Leah admire Hiraku for taming powerful creatures and cultivating such fertile crops. They note his surprising lack of worldly knowledge, as evidenced by his misconceptions about elves and angels. Meanwhile, Hiraku crafts a wooden cup in his hut, contemplating the next steps for his waterway, hoping the girls will lend a hand. Zabuton proudly presents Hiraku with a caught queen bee. With no intention of harming it and the bee showing no aggression, Hiraku decides to build a small hive, hoping to harvest honey in the future. As he works, Tia, flying by, becomes curious but is wary of the hive, apologizing for the interruption. Hiraku realizes he'll need to plant flowers to support the bees. Next, Hiraku digs a large hole, planning to create a reservoir by diverting water from the river. Leah, observing his progress, suggests they consider the materials for the waterway. Hiraku imagines using stone, but Leah points out the difficulty in sourcing it. He then considers wood, but Leah explains that multiple connections would cause leakage. Finally, Hiraku uses the almighty tool to compact the soil, making it as solid as concrete. With the elves working on the foundation, Hiraku focuses on sealing and reinforcing the structure. While fishing, Hiraku catches some aggressive fish from the forest of death. Tia and Ru, recognizing the species, are hesitant to eat them, making Hiraku taste them first. Finding the fish delicious, they all enjoy it, prompting Hiraku to catch more and preserve them with salt. Surprised at his success with growing rice, Hiraku decides to create a rice paddy now that water is accessible. After digging and flooding the area, the girls think he's making a fish pond, but he clarifies and asks for help planting rice. The rice grows quickly, and Hiraku teaches them to harvest it. Using his tool, he crafts a thresher and sieve, then processes the rice with a mortar and pestle. After a long process, he finally cooks the rice, making rice balls with fish, which the girls devour, leaving just one grain for him. The girls, who use magic to clean themselves, see Hiraku's need for a bath and help him build one. Despite their suggestion to wash in the river, Hiraku explains the comfort of a warm bath, especially in winter. The bath project progresses well until Hiraku worries about wastewater disposal. Tia proposes using slimes to purify the water, and Hiraku builds a purification pool. While Tia suggests placing slimes in the toilets, Hiraku hesitates at the idea of doing his business over a slime. Discovering mushrooms on his logs, Hiraku, unsure of their safety, uses the almighty tool to cultivate shiitake, shimeji, and other varieties. In the evening, he instructs the girls on using the bath. Leah suggests he demonstrate, and after showing them, he almost melts in relaxation. The girls join him, insisting they all bathe together to save water. Hiraku, feeling crowded, contemplates a separate bath for men, but the girls argue for fairness. The next day, Hiraku's mushroom cultivation is successful, and he plans a mushroom hot pot. Hearing the dogs, he finds they've brought 5 new elves. Noticing their names begin with La, Hiraku realizes they are related. Leah explains they knew these elves from their old village, though they hadn't seen each other for 200 years. Hiraku welcomes them, and Leah suggests building a house for the new arrivals and improving Hiraku's house. Kuro, observing the growing number of females in their group, shares his backstory. Once a lone wolf, Kuro met a female who defeated him, and they started a family. They faced danger from a grappler bear and, injured, reached the forest center, where they encountered Hiraku. Impressed by Hiraku's strength and kindness, Kuro and his mate chose him as their master. Despite being a fearsome inferno wolf, Kuro feels grateful to Hiraku and trusts his leadership, thankful for the new life they've found together. Hiraku's new house is finally complete. The girls excitedly give him a tour, showing him around and leading him to his room. As they continue, Hiraku notices a room with a bolt lock. Curious, he opens the door slightly, only to see a bed meant for 2. Embarrassed, he quickly shuts the door, pretending he didn't see anything. The following day, Hiraku decides to try something new, making curry. He takes the girls to a part of his crops filled with unfamiliar plants and explains that, thanks to the almighty tool, he can grow plants typically unsuitable for snowy areas. He starts by gathering cumin, then moves on to turmeric, explaining its role in giving curry its vibrant color. Next, he collects coriander seeds, cilantro leaves, which the dogs find off-putting, and finishes with black pepper and cayenne peppers. With the spices ready, Hiraku begins cooking. Only Leah stays with him, explaining that Rue and Tia are engrossed in research for a powerful protection talisman. Hiraku heats rapeseed oil and adds rabbit meat. While it cooks, he grinds the spices except for the cumin. After browning the meat, he sets it aside and sautés the cumin in the remaining juices, followed by onions, ginger, garlic, and tomatoes. Once it becomes a paste, he adds the ground spices, salt, the meat, boiled soybeans, and water. As the curry simmers, he realizes he forgot naan. Hiraku quickly explains how to make naan, similar to bread, until rolling it out with a pin. The girls return just in time to eat. He teaches them how to scoop curry with naan, and they eagerly go for seconds, leaving Hiraku hoping they'll save some for him. Rue and Tia offer the curry to the dogs, but the smell sends them running. As winter approaches, Hiraku prepares by gathering firewood and asking Zabuton for extra blankets, knowing Zabuton will hibernate soon. He has Rue and Tia preserve meat by smoking and drying it since hunting will be scarce in the cold months. Hiraku invents a 2-floor box for preserving vegetables, with the top layer holding vegetables covered in blankets and snow, while melted snow collects below to keep them dry. Watching the girls use magic, Hiraku wishes he could too but is grateful for their help, as he excels mainly in gardening and cooking. Rue reassures him, amazed by his survival in the harsh forest. When winter settles in, Hiraku decides to make board games like Reversi, chess, and mahjong. He explains Reversi, where the game ends when the board is full and the player with more of their color pieces wins. Rue finds the rules simple, but Tia points out the potential for complex strategies, impressing Hiraku. Annoyed, Rue challenges Tia. Despite Tia's clear lead, Rue accidentally flips the board, suggesting they start over. Tia restores the board with magic, and after a few more flips, Rue agrees to a best-of-3 match. Meanwhile, Hiraku notices other girls learning the games, with Kuro advising them. He's astonished to see the dogs playing chess and understanding it, deciding to avoid challenging them. Rue eventually plays chess with the dogs, expecting an easy win but ends up losing, too intimidated to flip the board. Hiraku tries mahjong with Kuro, Tia, and Leah but is outmatched, finishing last while Kuro wins effortlessly. Feeling dejected, Hiraku makes a mini bowling set, naming the pins after villains for fun. The daily games make winter pass quickly, and soon, spring arrives. One morning, Zabuton sounds an alert. Hiraku looks up to see something large approaching from the sky. He guesses it's a dragon, but Tia corrects him, saying it's a wyvern. The wyvern suddenly launches an attack, breathing a torrent of fire at Hiraku and his group. Rue and Tia quickly use their magic to shield themselves from the flames, but the fire spreads, threatening the crops. Thankfully, the elves act swiftly to contain it. As the situation unfolds, Hiraku is left wondering how to defeat the wyvern. He summons the almighty tool, and to his surprise, it transforms into a spear. With a quick motion, he hurls the spear at the wyvern, which creates a 3-layer barrier in defense. To Hiraku's amazement, the spear pierces through the shield and strikes its wing. He throws it again, this time hitting the wyvern's chest and ending the battle. Hiraku is left pondering if it's common to encounter wyverns, but Rue explains they are rare creatures. He then wonders if someone could have sent it, but Tia adds that if that were the case, it wouldn't have been alone. Wyverns are valuable creatures. Hiraku concludes it was just a lucky encounter. He then turns to the more practical question. Can they eat it? The girls confirm that wyvern meat is considered a delicacy. Hiraku decides to prepare 3 dishes using the wyvern meat, and the girls eagerly dig in. Rue asks Tia if she could have blocked Hiraku's spear, but Tia admits that, given the wyvern's inability to stop it, she likely wouldn't have been able to either. Rue jokingly remarks that they were lucky to have met the dogs first, not Hiraku. Meanwhile, in the demonic kingdom of Galgardo, a report reaches the demon lord's castle that a wyvern was slain. Randon is stunned, as any wyvern that ventures close to their territory would require a full mobilization of their forces. Beazle reports that the wyvern was killed with 2 precise strikes from the ground. Randon fears that they may not be able to contend with such powerful opponents, but Beazle insists that as the 4 generals, they must handle the situation swiftly to prevent panic. Randon contemplates resigning, but Beazle tries to stop him. At the gatekeeper dragon's lair, Dorame, a blue dragon, asks Gucci if he saw the wyvern's defeat. Gucci confirms it, and Dorame wonders what would have happened had he taken the spear attack. Gucci suggests the spear would likely have pierced right through him. Dorame decides that attacking would be foolish. Back at Hiraku's village, Hiraku relishes the wyvern meat but feels something is missing. He decides to try making alcohol for the first time. He wonders if wine exists in this world and chooses to make it from grapes. The girls are excited, and they quickly harvest the grapes. Hiraku sets up a fermentation area, asking the girls to stomp the grapes. At first, they feel awkward, but then the elves suggest a rhythm and begin singing a song from their village, making the task more enjoyable. They fill several barrels, and Hiraku decides to let the yeast on the grapeskins ferment the juice. He worries that they may have made too much wine, but upon hearing that the girls will drink it quickly, he wonders if he made too little. Elsewhere, the god observes Hiraku and wonders if this is enough to earn his forgiveness. The goddess of agriculture, however, is unimpressed. She scolds the god for punishing an innocent soul and sending him to the forest of death. She is further angered by the god's decision to give Hiraku a replica of the holy lance grime, explaining that it should have killed him instantly. The god defends himself, saying the lance is being used as a farming tool, and that he had permission. The goddess remains furious, especially since the god didn't inform her he had given the lance to a human. She also criticizes the god statues Hiraku made, pointing out that they resemble an old man. The god tries to argue, but the goddess punishes him by forcing him to sit still for 300 years. Meanwhile, Zabuton alerts Hiraku, who discovers that the dogs and spiders have captured a new girl, Rue's younger sister, Flora. As they escort Flora to the village, she reveals that she had been followed by an angel and entered the forest for safety. Hiraku offers her a place to rest, and Flora is intrigued to learn that Hiraku is Rue's husband. Rue explains that he is the master of the Inferno Wolves and that he even killed a wyvern. Flora immediately apologizes for her misunderstanding. Hiraku realizes that Kuro is not just a dog, but an Inferno Wolf, and is amazed when Kuro breathes fire. The elves are surprised Hiraku didn't know this, as Inferno Wolves are well-known creatures that have lived with them for a long time. Hiraku prepares a meal for Flora, who enjoys it. He shares his desire to make miso and soy sauce, explaining that both are made from fermented soybeans. Flora, fascinated by fermentation, becomes excited about researching the process. A few days later, Flora leaves but returns in a month, bringing her maids with her, and the maid leader offers their services to Hiraku. Flora also brings 2 cows, and Hiraku is thrilled that they can now make butter and cheese. Tia, noticing the growing numbers of various groups, feels a little isolated and decides to leave for a while. When she returns, she brings underlings, 3 angels, Gran Maria, Cudel, and Caron, a group of lizard men led by Daga, and a chicken. With the arrival of the maids, the work in the village becomes much more efficient. Hiraku notices that while the ogres don't cook anything complicated, they seem eager to learn, so he teaches them the cooking methods he knows. The 3 angels, under Tia's guidance, patrol the forest for security after the wyvern incident. The lizard men handle all the heavy labor outdoors, speeding up construction projects. One day, Hiraku is greeted by Leah, who has brought all the elves she found in the forest. He is surprised to see that all of them are female and wonders about the male elves. Leah explains that the men didn't survive, but they plan to have many more. Hiraku is happy for them but decides not to ask too many questions about how they plan to achieve that. Several days later, Hiraku calls a meeting with the representatives of each group to discuss naming the village. Rue suggests naming it after Hiraku, but he dismisses the idea, and proposes naming it after the forest, but Hiraku objects, saying that the Forest of Death doesn't sound welcoming. Just as he's about to give up, Zabuton points to the door, and when Hiraku opens it, he sees the great tree outside. Inspired, he names the village the Great Tree Village, Taiju Village. That evening, he announces the name to everyone and reveals that there will be a celebration. The villagers eagerly call Hiraku their mayor, but he humbly insists that the title can be decided later. The girls inform him that it's already decided, and the village celebrates their new name by enjoying the first batch of wine they made.